Brace yourselves, because today we're diving into the darkest corners of human behavior, kids committing unimaginable crimes. From a 12-year-old poisoning his own family's tea to teens plotting to murder their parents, these cases will shake you to your core. Get ready to question everything you thought you knew about childhood innocence as we unravel the most feared kids in prison. This is a harrowing journey you won't want to miss. Number 10. The Bever Brothers. Let me tell you about a very sad and scary story that happened a few years ago. It's called the Bever Brothers crime story. This terrible event took place in a quiet neighborhood in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma in 2015. Two brothers, Robert and Michael Bever, did something really bad. They hurt and killed some members of their own family. Their victims were their mom and dad, David and April Bever. They also killed 3 of their younger brothers and sisters, Daniel, who was 12 years old, Christopher, who was 7, and little Victoria, who was only 5 years old. It was actually Daniel, the 12-year-old brother, who called 911 for help. He may have saved the lives of his 2 sisters, Autumn, who was 2 years old, and Crystal, who was 13. Crystal later told the police that it was her older brothers Robert and Michael who had attacked their family. The police found out that Robert was 18 years old at the time, and Michael was 16. They were interested in learning about mass shootings like the one at Columbine High School. They even wrote in their journals that they wanted to do something worse than the Columbine shooting. Isn't that scary? Because of the horrible things they did, Robert and Michael were arrested. At first, the court thought about treating them like kids because of their ages. But then they decided the crime was so bad that they would be treated like adults instead. In 2016, Robert admitted he did it and said he was guilty. The judge gave him a life sentence in prison with no chance of ever getting out. Michael didn't admit to the crime at first. He had a trial in 2017 where he was found guilty too. He also got a life sentence just like his brother. This very sad story shows how some people can have dark thoughts that make them do terrible things. It's important for people to get help if they are having thoughts of hurting others before it's too late. We also need to pay close attention if someone, especially a young person, starts acting in a way that makes us worried they might hurt themselves or others. The people in Broken Arrow were devastated by what the Bever brothers did to their own family. It's a story that teaches us to be aware of mental health issues and to stop violence before it happens. Number 9. Amarjit Sada. Amarjit Sada was a young boy from a small village in India called Musari. He was born in 1998. When Amarjit was around 8 years old, he did something terrible. He killed his baby cousin who was only 6 months old. People thought it was just an accident at first. But Amarjit didn't stop there. Over the next 2 years, he killed 2 more little kids who were even younger than him. This made people in the village really scared and worried. They couldn't believe a child could do such horrible crimes. Finally, Amarjit's family found the dead bodies of his 2 other little cousins, aged 3 years and 8 months, hidden in a nearby field. It was so sad and scary. When they asked Amarjit about it, he calmly admitted that he had killed them. Nobody could understand why he did these evil things. Some people thought maybe evil spirits made him do it, or maybe he saw too much violent stuff on TV. In India, kids under 7 years old cannot go to jail or have a trial in court. So instead of prison, Amarjit went to a special home for kids where they could try to help him and figure out what was wrong with him. His story made people in India think a lot about kids who do bad crimes and how to spot problems early before it's too late. Years went by, but people still wondered, why would such a young child hurt other little kids like that? Did he really know how wrong and terrible it was? Could anything have been done to stop him from becoming so evil at such a young age? Amarjit's story is a warning to all of us to watch out for kids who seem troubled and get them help before it's too late. Number 8. Lionel Tate. It happened back in 1999 when Lionel was just 12 years old. He was babysitting a 6-year-old girl named Tiffany Unick. They started wrestling and playing around, but things went terribly wrong. Lionel was much bigger and stronger than little Tiffany. He tried doing some wrestling moves he had seen on TV. Unfortunately, one of those moves seriously hurt Tiffany. She got such bad injuries that she died. It was a horrible accident that no one wanted to happen. When the grown-ups found out, they put Lionel on trial for murder. Can you believe that? A 12-year-old boy being tried for murder? It was a really big deal all over the country. People were arguing if Lionel was just playing around like a kid or if he had done something really bad on purpose. Lionel's lawyer said he never meant to hurt Tiffany. It was just an accident from playing too roughly. But the other lawyers pointed out how badly Tiffany was injured. They said Lionel must have used a lot of force, so it couldn't have been an accident. In the end, the judge decided Lionel was guilty of murder. In 2001, when Lionel was only 14, he got a life sentence in prison. He was the youngest person in over 100 years to get such a harsh punishment for murder in America. A lot of people thought it was really unfair. They said the court should have considered how young Lionel was and that he probably didn't understand how dangerous those wrestling moves could be. The case made everyone argue about how the law should treat kids who do bad things. After 3 years in prison, Lionel's sentence was canceled in 2004. He got out but had to be on probation for 10 years. His dream of becoming a pro wrestler was over though. The story of Lionel Tate and Tiffany Unick is just so sad and makes you think really hard. It shows how tough it is for the law to decide what to do when kids do something really bad, even if they didn't mean it. In the end, the important thing is that justice has to happen, even in difficult situations involving kids. But this case makes you wonder if life in prison was the right call for a child like Lionel Tate. Number 7. Roxan Sikorski. It all started in 2014 in a nice, quiet neighborhood. Roxan Sikorski was just 15 years old at the time. She seemed like a regular teenage girl, but little did anyone know, she was about to get mixed up in something really bad. You see, Roxana met this guy named Michael Rivera. He was 22 years old and had already been through some tough stuff in his life. At first, Roxana and Michael were just boyfriend and girlfriend. But then, things took a very dark turn. Can you believe it? They actually made a plan to kill Roxana's whole family. Her brothers, her sisters, even her mom and dad who had adopted her. It's hard to imagine why anyone would want to do something so horrible. Thankfully, in October of that year, someone found out about their evil scheme before they could go through with it. The police stepped in right away and arrested both Roxana and Michael. But that's not the end of the story. Because of what they tried to do, Roxana faced having to go to prison for a really long time. When it was time for her court case, her mom Lorene begged the judge to go easy on her daughter. Lorene said it was really Michael's fault for getting Roxana mixed up in this mess. She said her daughter needed help from people who know about kids' minds, not punishment. It seemed like Michael, being older, had taken advantage of Roxana. In court, Roxana herself apologized to her parents for what she had done. She said she felt terrible for not being the good daughter they expected. Seeing her so sorry made a lot of people cry. In the end, the judge sentenced Roxana to spend 10 to 20 years locked up for her part in the crazy murder plot. This whole situation is a powerful reminder that toxic relationships can really mess somebody up, especially a young person. One bad influence was almost enough to rip Roxana's entire family apart forever. The scars from what happened will never fully heal for Roxana, her parents, her brothers and sisters, and everyone else affected. It shows how quickly trust can be broken when people make terrible choices without thinking it through. So let this story be a warning to watch out for people who might lead you down a dark path. Cherish your family because they're precious. And always, always think before you act. Number 6. Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke. This is a really scary story, so brace yourselves. Back in 2006, there was a 12-year-old girl named Jasmine Richardson. She lived in Medicine Hat, Canada. Jasmine had a boyfriend named Jeremy Steinke, who was 23 years old. That's a pretty big age difference, right? At first, Jasmine was a happy and social kid. But after meeting Jeremy at a punk rock concert, she changed a lot. Jasmine became really interested in the goth lifestyle. Jeremy had a tough childhood and claimed he was a 300-year-old werewolf. Weird, right? He even wore a vial of blood around his neck. Jasmine's parents, Mark and Deborah, didn't like her dating an older guy like Jeremy. They told Jasmine she couldn't see him anymore. This made Jasmine and Jeremy really mad at her parents. The anger grew so much that they made a plan to kill Jasmine's whole family. Jeremy wrote angry messages on his blog. Jasmine sent him an email saying, "It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." Scary stuff. The night before the murders, they watched a really violent movie, which made them even more excited to do this terrible thing. The next day, Jasmine and Jeremy killed Mark, Deborah, and Jasmine's 8-year-old brother. A neighbor saw something strange and called the police. When the police came, they found the bodies of Jasmine's family members. At first, they thought Jasmine was a victim too, since she was just a kid. But then the police found emails and other digital proof that Jasmine and Jeremy had planned the whole thing together. People who knew them said they had admitted to the murders. At her trial, Jasmine said the conversations about killing her family were just hypothetical. But she was found guilty of murdering all three of them. Jasmine, who was called Junior at the trial because she was so young, got sentenced to 6 years in jail. After that, she had to be supervised in the community for 4 more years. Jeremy, who was 25 at the time, got a life sentence in prison with no chance for parole for 25 years. While Jasmine was in jail, she got help for some disorders she had been diagnosed with. She showed that she really felt sorry for what she did and could control her behavior better. So, in 2016, after serving her whole sentence, Jasmine was released from the criminal justice system. This just goes to show how much trouble people can get into when they're influenced by dark stuff and toxic relationships. It's really important to be careful about the people we hang around and the things we expose ourselves to. Number 5. Sierra Halseth. Have you heard about Sierra Halseth and her boyfriend Aaron Guerrero? Their story made big news in 2021. It was a really scary crime that shocked a lot of people. Sierra and Aaron were just teenagers, but they did something terrible. They killed Sierra's own father, Daniel Halseth. Can you imagine a daughter killing her own dad? It's so sad. The whole thing happened at their home in Las Vegas. Sierra and Aaron planned it all out carefully. They wanted to be free and run away together. But instead of finding a normal way to do that, they decided to hurt someone. They stabbed Sierra's dad many times. Then they set him on fire to try and hide what they did. Isn't that just awful? The police were really shocked at how violent the crime was. The good news is that the police caught Sierra and Aaron quickly. They got arrested for murder, burning things, plotting the crime, and even robbery. They faced big trouble for what they did at such a young age. Part of the story is about social media too. Sierra and Aaron love sharing pictures and videos of themselves online, like on TikTok. They made their relationship look perfect and romantic. But then this horrible crime happened. The whole community couldn't believe this had happened right there. Everyone felt so sad for Sierra's dad and their family. The legal case was huge news as people waited to see what would happen to the teens. Sierra and Aaron will likely spend many years in jail or prison for their actions. Their story reminds us that even young people can make terrible choices that ruin lives. It also shows how social media can sometimes make people view the world in unhealthy ways. Overall, it's a tragic story of 2 teens who did something so terribly wrong. One family lost a loved one forever because of it. The whole community was left feeling shocked and heartbroken. Number 4. The Teacup Poisoner. Graham Young was born in 1947 in North London. When Graham was just a baby, his mom died from an illness called tuberculosis. That was really sad. After his mom died, his dad sent him to live with his Aunt Winnie. Then later, his dad got married again, and Graham had to leave his aunt's house. All these changes made Graham feel very anxious and upset. When Graham was a kid, he was really interested in science, especially chemistry and stuff about poisons. His stepdad Frank gave him a chemistry set as a gift, and Graham just loved experimenting with it. He spent so much time playing with the chemistry set that his friends started calling him the Mad Professor. Here's where it gets really scary. When Graham was just 13 years old, he somehow got his hands on real poisonous chemicals. He told the grown-up chemists that he was older and that he needed the chemicals for school projects. But that was a lie. Instead of using the poisons for school, he started putting them in people's tea and making them drink it. Can you believe that? He poisoned his own family and his schoolmates. In 1961, Graham's stepmom Molly got really sick with stomach cramps after drinking some tea that Graham had put poison in. Sadly, she died from the poison. That's when people started getting suspicious about Graham. They noticed other weird things too, like how he seemed to really like Adolf Hitler, who was a very bad man, and how he once made an explosion in the kitchen from his experiments. Graham's aunt knew about his interest in poisons, so she made him go see a doctor who could help him. That's when the police got involved. In 1962, Graham was arrested and he admitted to poisoning his family. But because Molly had already been cremated, which means her body was burned, Graham didn't get in trouble for killing her. Instead, he was sent to a special hospital for people who need a lot of help. After 8 years in the hospital, the doctors thought Graham was all better, so they let him out in 1970. But really, Graham still had a plan to kill one person for every year he had spent in the hospital. That's so messed up. Graham got a job at a place that made military equipment with a poison called thallium. And you'll never guess what he did. He started poisoning his co-workers with the thallium. Some of them got really sick, and some even died. The doctor at the workplace started wondering why so many people were getting poisoned, and that's when they realized it was Graham doing it again. When the police searched Graham's stuff, they found a diary where he had written all about poisoning his co-workers and using thallium. In 1972, Graham was sent to prison for the rest of his life. He died in 1990, but some people think he might have poisoned himself on purpose for one last experiment. Isn't that just the craziest story? Graham Young's life was so messed up. They even made a movie about him called The Young Poisoner's Handbook and put a wax figure of him in a museum of really creepy stuff. Number 3. James Fairweather. Have you ever heard of James Fairweather? He was just a regular kid born in 1999. But when he became a teenager, he did some really scary things that made people very afraid. It all started in 2014 when James was just 15 years old. His first victim was a man named James Atfield. Poor Mr. Atfield had brain injuries and needed crutches to walk. One day in a park in Colchester, Essex, James Fairweather stabbed him over 100 times. Can you imagine how horrible that must have been? The police couldn't believe someone would do something so mean and violent for no reason. Just 2 months later, in March 2014, Fairweather struck again. This time, his victim was Nahid Al-Manea, a 31-year-old student from Saudi Arabia studying at the University of Essex. She was just walking on the footpath when Fairweather attacked and killed her by stabbing her repeatedly. It was so senseless and tragic. The people in Colchester were really scared. A killer was on the loose, murdering people for no good reason at all. The police tried their best to catch the bad guy, but for a long time, they couldn't figure out who was doing these awful crimes. You see, James Fairweather was just a young kid. No one suspected a teenager could be behind such horrifying acts of violence. But in May 2015, when Fairweather was 16 years old, he messed up big time. He started bragging to his friends about the murders he had committed. Can you believe that? His friends went to the police, and finally, Fairweather was arrested. During his trial, some very disturbing things came to light. It turned out that Fairweather was really interested in other famous killers like Ted Bundy and the Yorkshire Ripper. He had learned about how they killed people and copied their methods. Isn't that just creepy? He also played a lot of violent video games and spent time online with people who thought hurting others was cool. The lawyers and doctors also talked about Fairweather's mental health. Some people thought he might have had problems in his mind that made him want to kill, even though he was just a kid. It was a really tough case to figure out. In the end, in April 2016, Fairweather was found guilty of murdering James Atfield and Nahid Al-Manea. He was sent to prison for life, with no chance of getting out for at least 27 years. That's a long time. The whole story of James Fairweather is just so sad. It makes us wonder what kind of things in our society might lead a young person to become a killer. Was it the violent games and websites he looked at? Was it because he had mental health issues that no one noticed? These are hard questions to answer, but they're important to think about so we can try to prevent other kids from going down such a dark and scary path. Number 2. Mary Bell. She was born on May 26, 1957, in a city called Newcastle upon Tyne in England. Her life wasn't easy from the start. Her mom, Betty McCricket, was not a very nice lady. She worked as a sex worker and would often leave little Mary and her sister Norma all alone at home. That's not a good way to treat kids, is it? Even as a young girl, Mary acted a bit strange. She seemed troubled and upset a lot of the time. But in the spring and summer of 1968, when Mary was just 10 years old, she did something really terrible. She killed 2 little boys. Their names were Martin Brown and Brian Howe, and they were only 3 and 4 years old. Can you imagine that? Mary strangled them and did other awful things to their bodies. She even tried to make it look like accidents. When the little boys were found, it scared everyone in the neighborhood. The police started a big investigation to find out who did this horrible thing. They soon became suspicious of Mary and her friend Norma Bell, who was 13 years old at the time. the girls acted really weird when the police asked them questions about the murders. In December 1968, Mary had to go to court for her trial. It was a very important case because she was so young when she committed such terrible crimes. The judge decided that Mary was guilty of killing the boys, but because she was just a child, she couldn't be blamed entirely. So Mary was sent away to a special place for an unknown amount of time. Her friend Norma was let go because she didn't actually kill anyone. This case made a lot of people think hard about whether kids can really do such bad things. And it made them wonder how much blame a young person should get for terrible actions. After Mary was sent away, she was given a new name so that nobody would recognize her. Some people say she's grown up, had her own family, and tried to live a normal life away from everyone's attention. Number 1. The Mistake Under the Bed. This is a really scary story that took place in 1998 in a city called Jacksonville. It's about a 14-year-old boy named Joshua Phillips and his 8-year-old neighbor, Maddie Clifton. Maddie was a happy girl who loved playing with Joshua. They were friends, and she often went over to his house. But one day, they got into a big argument. Joshua got so angry that he hit Maddie with a baseball bat. The hit was so hard that it killed Maddie. When Joshua realized what he had done, he got really scared. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he made a terrible choice. He decided to hide Maddie's body under his bed. Can you imagine? For a whole week, Maddie's body was hidden there while everyone was looking for her. Joshua pretended to help look for Maddie, but he knew exactly where she was. Maddie's family, friends, and neighbors were all searching, but they had no idea her body was right there in Joshua's room. Finally, after a week, the police got a clue that led them to Joshua's house. When they looked under his bed, they found Maddie's body. It was a really sad and scary sight. Joshua was arrested for killing Maddie. At his trial, his lawyers said he didn't mean to kill her and that he just panicked after hitting her. But the prosecutor said Joshua was smart and had planned to hide Maddie's body on purpose. In the end, even though Joshua was only 14, he was tried as an adult because of how serious the crime was. He was found guilty of murder and got a life sentence in prison with no chance of getting out. This case made people think hard about whether kids as young as 14 should be tried as adults for crimes. It was a very sad situation all around. What heinous acts of these teenagers have you been most struck by? What do you think of them? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. We'd love it if you liked the video and started subscribing to us. If you want to see more videos we've made for you, click on one on the screen or check out the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.